Congressman, do you have a question?
So for North Carolina, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, you statistically can go and say, hey, look, you got disenfranchised in 25 counties. You know what that vote probably would have been, which would be, if I were in the legislature, enough to go, yeah, we got to convene the legislature, and we can't disenfranchise the vote. But how do you make the argument in other states? I mean, otherwise it looks like it's just a power play. With North Carolina, I mean, it's legitimate. I mean, there are a lot of people who aren't going to get to vote, and it may make the difference in that state.
This is Democracy Watch. Mark, that was House Freedom Caucus Chair Andy Harris saying that North Carolina legislators should consider just awarding their state's electors to Donald Trump before votes are counted because of the damage that Hurricane Helene wrought onto the state. And so that justifies it because, as he says, we know how those people would have voted anyway. What's your reaction to this?
Look, I've always said there are only two kinds of Republicans right now. There is scared MAGA and proud MAGA. Andy Harris is proud MAGA. Like he's not trying to hide it. He's telling you right there that thinks it's a great idea if the North Carolina legislature, which is, by the way, supermajority Republican, right? So this is not a bipartisan legislature, that they just go ahead and vote to obliterate the popular ballot at all in that state for president and just award the presidential electors to Donald Trump. Just literally do away with the election for president. And that is who they are. I mean, that is who the MAGA movement is. You know, this is not an outlier, as you say. This is the chair of the House Freedom Caucus, which is among the largest, if not the largest caucus of House Republicans, and certainly its most powerful, right? This is not a fringe part of the House Republican movement. This is the mainstream of the Republican Party in the House of Representatives. And if anyone thinks that Republicans are committed to free and fair elections, if anyone believes that there is a limit to what they would be willing to do to give this election to Donald Trump, they need to watch that video over and over every single day. Because on top of everything else, Brian, on top of everything else, he has the audacity to use a natural disaster that they have exploited for political gain. By lying about the response of FEMA, by lying about the response of the White House, that they are using that to justify disenfranchising the very voters who were victimized by that hurricane, as well as the rest of the voters in the Tar Heel state. It's absolutely shameful.
You know what the ultimate irony of that, too, is that Democrats in North Carolina filed a bill to extend voter registration deadlines and allow absentee ballots just a few more days to arrive in light of that hurricane in western North Carolina, which, as Andy Harris alludes to, is more Republican than Democratic. And the Republicans unilaterally voted that down, even though, again, it would benefit overwhelmingly their own voters. And so they're not willing to actually help these people when they have the opportunity to offer some practical solution. And yet they're perfectly willing to exploit that tragedy to ultimately just help Donald Trump.
Yeah. And to further the big lie. I mean, that's the thing. Like, they don't want voting to be smooth because they want to be able to say that the voting system in America is not reliable, that the voting system in America does not yield free and fair results, that the voting system in America, we should disregard results, not just in North Carolina, but around the country. And again, you know, you are watching a politician advocate not just for the disenfranchisement of others, but for the disenfranchisement of his own constituents.
Yeah.
He is saying that his own voters should not be allowed to vote for president. You know what I didn't hear? I didn't hear him say that they shouldn't be allowed to vote for Congress. How about that? How about that?
Right.
Where the legislature doesn't get to a point. How about they say we don't have congressional elections, Congressman, so that you don't get to take your seat in January?
Well, of course, if they didn't have those elections, they would just do what they do with Donald Trump and just assume that because those are Republican voters that we know how they would vote anyway. And so I guess that's the whole point of this. It's not even about giving themselves the opportunity to get elected. It is about giving themselves the opportunity to anoint who they think should get elected.
Yeah, and you know, we know from the state-by-state polls that actually Kamala Harris is basically tied with Donald Trump. Some show her ahead, some her a little behind. And by the way, it shows that the governor's race is a blowout. Shows that the Democrat, Josh Stein, is going to win that governor's race in a landslide, given all of the extracurricular activities and problems that the Republican nominee has.
Yeah.
And so it's not at all clear, as he suggests, how the election would turn out. And I suspect if he was confident how the election would turn out, he wouldn't be about disenfranchising his voters. He wants to disenfranchise these voters because he doesn't think that Donald Trump will win.
Right.
And he wants to use the hurricane as an excuse to not allow the people of North Carolina to cast their ballots and to do this. Well, I got news for him. It's not going to happen. And if he tried it, it wouldn't work.
And by the way, as we discuss the prospect of what these Republicans are trying to do in the election landscape and the post-election landscape, that's a good opportunity for us to announce that we have an event, a panel coming up with you, me, and Congressman Jamie Raskin. It's called The Race to Certify What Happens After Election Day. So I know that there are a lot of questions floating around about what to expect. So we're going to be having that discussion. Obviously, for those watching right now, you all know that Marc is the, at the forefront of these legal challenges in the courts and the Republicans' efforts to undermine the election there. Congressman Raskin was a constitutional law professor at American University before joining Congress. So again, it doesn't get much better than these two guys in terms of answering any questions that we have. So for those who are watching right now and who want to attend, that's going to be on October 29th. I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video.
Yeah, and Brian, thank you for doing this, because this is going to be a great event. I mean, this is like, we will be a week out from the election, and we will be talking about all of the things that people need to focus on between, heading to election day, and then what comes after. And there is no one who has studied this more closely than you have. There's no one who's interviewed more guests. By the way, not just Democrats. Like, you have a series where you talk to prominent Republicans who have a lot of insights into how Republicans think about these. You talk to Glenn Kirshner, who's a leading lawyer, about what the legal aspects of all of this are. You don't just talk to me, you talk to other lawyers. And of course, you've interviewed almost everyone. I mean, you've interviewed presidents of the United States, speakers, leaders. And so it's going to be a great conversation, I think, the three of us, as we talk about what the various routes and landscape look.
Yeah, and definitely for those watching, again, make sure to sign up to attend October 29th. I'll put the link right in the post description of this video. Marc, going back to Andy Harris for a moment, he actually was called out on this and issued a statement. And his statement read, "As I've repeatedly said, every legal vote should be counted. I would hope everyone could agree that legal American voters whose lives were devastated by the recent storms should not be disenfranchised in the upcoming voting process." So by virtue of him saying that, it still sounds like he's doubling down even after being called out. And so, what's your reaction to that? To what seems like just a shameless redoubling of his initial comments here?
Look, the only person who's trying to disenfranchise anyone in North Carolina right now is Andy Harris and his party. As you point out, the Democrats have been lining up saying, how can we be helpful to these voters, many of whom don't vote for Democrats, to make sure that no one's disenfranchised. It is the Democrats who have been fighting for years in state after state in the state around this country to ensure that people who are affected by natural disasters are able to vote. I brought litigation years ago in Florida to make sure that hurricane victims were able to vote, even though, again, most of the people who were probably affected were Republicans. I don't need to hear from Andy Harris about how we don't disenfranchise people. If Andy Harris doesn't want to disenfranchise people in North Carolina, he should stop disenfranchising people. If Andy Harris doesn't want to disenfranchise people in North Carolina, he should sign on to the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. If he doesn't want to disenfranchise voters in North Carolina, he should sign on to the Freedom to Vote Act. If he doesn't want to disenfranchise voters in North Carolina, he should oppose all of the voter suppression laws that we see come out of the Republican-controlled legislature in that state. And finally, if he doesn't want to disenfranchise voters in North Carolina, he should stop talking about how the legislature should take over the allocation of electors and essentially throw out the ballots of millions of North Carolinians, because that is the ultimate disenfranchising of voters. This is the same kind of lying and misinformation and disinformation that the MAGA movement and Donald Trump live off of, and shame on Andy Harris.
Marc, can you speak on the normalization of this kind of rhetoric and whether simply moving the goalposts unto itself is a strategy? Like him just saying this, normalizing it, getting it more into the zeitgeist to the point where it, again, becomes normalized and and that the Overton window shifts so much that this is just the usual rhetoric, whether that unto itself can be considered a strategy for Republicans who obviously rely on this stuff, rely on pushing this stuff forward at some point.
Yeah, that is exactly what they're doing. And by the way, they're having some success. I mean, 3-4 years ago, mostly what Republicans would say when Donald Trump said something outrageous or someone like Andy Harris said something outrageous is they'd say, "Oh, I didn't see that." Remember all the politicians who never saw
a lot of a lot of willful blindness around Donald Trump's Twitter feed.
Yeah, now Donald Trump says, I want generals like Hitler had. And they don't even say, I didn't see it. They're like, oh, well, he likes generals. Maybe he didn't mean exactly Adolf Hitler. Maybe he meant some other Hitler. I mean, like they have shifted what they will excuse to such an extent that it is unrecognizable. So you have Andy Harris here like saying, well, yeah, maybe we should just not have presidential popular vote in North Carolina and just have the Republican legislature allocate the things. I mean, that would have been so far outside the norm even 4 years ago.
Right.
But now it's kind of like, well, what he really meant was,
right.
What he really meant is what he said.
Yeah.
Like that's what he said. And that's what he meant. And he meant to say it. And Republicans' inability to ever call these things out for what they are, it will be a black mark on them for the remainder of their lives and through history.
Well, look, as this party continues to show itself for what it is, which is a lawless faction of sycophants for Donald Trump and all of his plans to subvert the election, that obviously underscores the importance of the work that you and your team are doing in the courts right now to push back against these extrajudicial efforts against Democrats in all of the states. So for everybody watching, if you're looking for a small step that we can all take to support the invaluable work that Marc and his team are doing, is to sign up for Democracy Docket, which is the news outlet Marc founded to focus on everything voting in elections. Again, a small step to support his team and an invaluable resource that we can all look forward to reading to get more information, to get smarter ahead of Election Day. So I'll put that link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. Again, for those who want to attend the panel with me, Marc, and Jamie Raskin, I'll put that link in the post description as well. That's October 29th, and very much looking forward to seeing everybody there. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Marc Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.